Hi there, my name's Raven, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. So I wanted to tell you another very quick story time today. I do want to let you know that because I'm living in a very rural area, my internet connection is very slow, so it takes forever for videos to download, and that has led me to want to recreate this one particular big story that I am wanting to do first, but I thought I would make a story time today explaining why I chose this case as my first case. Now, if you saw my story times before, oh, excuse me, itchy nose today. If you saw my story times before, you will know that I have lived a great deal of my life in Vancouver, usually either in Vancouver, a few patches on Vancouver Island. And while living in Vancouver, a few minor cases and a few major cases affected me. As I said in my second story time, there was a murder, unfortunately, in my actual apartment building shortly after I moved back to Vancouver. And I explained how kind of ironic that was because I had thought I had been so careful about where I wanted to live in order for there to be the best possible environment for my daughter and myself living in the city. So I moved into a very fancy area, or what I had thought, and then this murder happened. And because a murder had happened, that was a topic of conversation for months to come in that building. And there was an outdoor pool, and as everyone was curious and kind of debriefing from that whole scenario, because there were numerous articles written in the major and smaller Vancouver newspapers, and it was on all the news stations, and the story of the woman and where she came from and everything was told. And it was a sad story, and also the family of the woman that died actually put a memorial in the garden area past the parking lot of where we lived. But getting back to what I wanted to talk to you about today, as I was meeting the neighbors for the first time in this large apartment building, I found something kind of funny, considering I'd chosen to live in a very different area from where, as a person in my late teens and early 20s, I had partied a lot in bars, and some of the bars, oh, cat in the background, it's a hazard here considering I'm living in an RV with cats and a large dog. I apologize for that distraction. Anyway, I had chosen to move to Kitsilano thinking that I would never cross paths, or rarely cross paths, with the people I knew from bars in the downtown east side and Gastown and other parts of Vancouver. Well, it turned out in the building I moved into, within the first 2 weeks, I swear, I was in the laundromat, and this man came up to me and he said, "You used to go too?" And then he proceeded to ask if I used to hang out at this bar in Vancouver called the Ivanhoe. And I said yes. And he was like, "Oh, I remember you from there." And that was like such a shock, because I had assumed, living across town, that I wouldn't meet people who knew me from there. Anyway, it turned out that man was a bartender, and his in-laws also lived in the same building, and we got to be great friends with them. And the in-law, his sister-in-law, asked me, and she said, "Oh yeah, I remember you from back at the Ivanhoe," and blah blah blah. And the Ivanhoe was quite a hangout. There's even a group on Facebook called "I've Been Drunk at the Ivanhoe," and it was like a very busy bar for many years. Possibly it still is, I don't know, but it's a very busy bar, and it's right near Main and Terminal, and a lot of students and all sorts of people hung out. But it is also on the edge of the downtown east side, so there are street people and people who live in single room occupancy hotels and prostitutes and people looking for prostitutes, and really it was all kinds of people that hung out there. So anyway, after all these repeated questions from this family who recognized me from the Ivanhoe, because we moved back to Vancouver either when the court case was happening or shortly before or shortly after while they were still investigating. Anyway, it was around the time of the Robert Pickton trial, and the women who recognized me from the Ivanhoe asked, "Do you remember Willie?" Meaning Robert William Pickton. And I was like, no. And I think something in my brain had just shut that off. After reading articles about him, the last I wanted to think was that I used to be in the same place as him when he was possibly picking up his victims. But anyway, so I did not remember him, and I stated that very clearly, and they had several anecdotes about him, and that was that. Well, then when I finally got the nerve to start this YouTube channel, I started thinking about which case I wanted to do first, and because it had such a huge impact on so many people, and still to this day there are unknown victims. There are between 1 and 3 Jane Does that have never been identified, and it was such a huge case and it had such a huge effect. I chose to do the pig farm as my first case for YouTube. And it was while watching documentaries that I have a photographic image of remembering exactly where he and his brother sat. And they were often just 1 or 2 tables over from me. So that is my story time about how I used to drink at the same bar as one of Canada's most famous serial killers. Thanks so much for listening, and have a great day.